Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where today we're going to be checking out the leafy stuff. And where else were we going to start but with the 2600, one of the earliest consoles. So let's open this box up and get the cartridge out, and let's see what manual or literature we have inside. And well, it's a single bit of paper, that's it. Nope, there's nothing even on the back really, it's just these 2 pages. So it's not really a manual as such, but it does go into some detail on the game at least. And we can see from later 2600 titles that things did start to change over its course, with Battlezone. But this is where we start to see something that becomes quite common. One manual containing multiple languages. So while it is much thicker and it does go into far more detail, it does trick you into thinking there's more information than there actually is. And well, at least there's some nice pictures in this one. But let's look at another early machine, the Philips Video Pack. Now this started a trend that we'll see more common as we go on, which is the manual is the cover. Oh, that one's a bit stiff. And this one is also in multiple languages, which makes it seem far thicker than it actually should be. But it does go into quite a bit of detail on the game, and considering this is just a Pac-Man clone, that is a lot of detail on Pac-Man. Now it's not just going to be consoles, we're going to take a look at computers. In particular, let's take a look at these 2 Spectrum games. We've got one in a cassette, which continued that trend of the manual also being the cover. I'm not sure you can call an inlay a manual, but it does at least tell you how to load the game and play it. So it's a step above some of the games that we'll check out. Though as we can see, with these box titles they did spend a bit more money on the paper. And we've got a manual that actually has multiple pages and goes into quite a bit of detail on the game itself, including some maps, which is a very nice thing to have. One area where computer makers didn't skimp out was the book for the machine itself. Just check this out. These were always your first port of call if you needed to know anything about your computer. Setting it up, of course. Wanted to know the schematics? Hell, that was in here as well. Or even if you wanted to learn how to program. Yep, these tended to have information about all the basic instructions in the computer itself. They were absolutely amazing. And this was something that carried on to the 16-bit era as well. As you can see, these Amiga manuals had some very similar information on setting it up, using it, or even the schematics of the hardware itself. Or if you just wanted to know how to use the operating system, then you had this book as well, and it went into lots of detail. But we are getting slightly ahead of ourselves, so let's jump back to the 8-bit era and check out what the consoles were doing at the time. And here we have one of the more budget-friendly releases for the Sega Master System, and even in this, they managed to fit an actual manual. Surprisingly, there is just a single language inside here. This also demonstrates Sega's earlier literature style. Now this would change with the Master System and would be continued to be used over the next decade. And this was where they had multiple languages on every page, which to be honest had this weird look where you'd have the same picture repeated multiple times. Now we're not quite done with the 8-bit era, as we still have the handhelds. And here we have some manuals from the amazing Game Boy. And this is the manual for that bit of hardware itself. And it shows off a style that they continued, which was to use just 3 colours, white, black and red. Well, it's not like they needed full colour images for the machine itself. And we see this styling in the earlier titles as well, such as Tetris, which again is just 3 colours. Though it does go into far more detail into Tetris than you'd ever expect. Though I guess they did have to tell people how to better link up their 2 Game Boys to play it multiplayer. Amazingly, later releases such as Donkey Kong Land still used those 3 primary colours, but at least had multiple shades this time. But this all changed when the Game Boy Color came out, and they had these much bigger manuals. Now this actually has multiple languages in it, but they did at least have full colour pictures of all the main characters as well as the in-game items. Now while this was all going on, the computer platforms hadn't stood still and were now using these big boxes, which gave us lots of room for some manuals. And they were getting really quite heavy as well. Now let's just check out these 2, which had a combined weight of 1,429 grams, or if you prefer old money, 3 pounds and 2 ounces. That is seriously heavy. So let's check out what is in these boxes, shall we? And in 1944 we get half a tree's worth of paper. This lot is so heavy it managed to crush the inlay. That's crazy. And first of all we get the manual, which tells us how to play the game itself, and I swear by the end of reading this I could probably drive a tank. But that's not everything, is it now? No, we also get the background historical documents. Yep, full background to the war, as well as various information on formations, tactics, and everything you wanted to know about fighting in World War II. And if that's not enough, then there's some additional technical documents as well to help you play. Hired Guns, on the other hand, isn't a simulation game, but it's equally as impressive with its documentation. So we get the floppy disks, let's get those out of the way, and then we have the gameplay manual. We get the instruction manual, yep, they're different things. We have the background booklet to the solar system that you play the game in. There's also the ever popular off-disk copy protection. Oh, and finally we get a background book on the characters themselves. Yep, this game really wanted you to know all about the setting as well as who you're going to be playing as. Putting extras into the box was quite popular on the computer platforms, as it meant the people who actually bought the game and didn't pirate it would get some nice cool extras, like Frontier Elite that not only had a very chunky manual but also had the Gazette, which was a newspaper about various bits and pieces that you could do in the game. But on top of that, it also had a whole book of short stories, which were amazing for the world building. But we can't forget the final thing in the box, that map. Ah, it's amazing, and it doesn't even fit on frame. And then there were games like Beneath the Steel Sky, which had this absolutely tiny manual. Thankfully the game itself is pretty easy to work out. But on top of that, it did have this, a comic book, as well as, well, an absolute metric ton of discs. The comic, as well as some of the in-game artwork, was actually done by industry veteran Dave Gibbons. Let's jump back to the consoles and check out the Mega Drive as well as the Super Nintendo. Sega had gone with an upgraded version of the Master System manual, where they now had much fancier paper but still had multiple languages per page, but at least this time they only showed the picture once. Now, trying to get your hands on SNES manuals isn't all that easy these days due to these cardboard boxes, and as a result I don't really have many games to show. So here we have a football title that I found, which at first glance seems to have that same red, black and white styling that we saw with the Game Boy. But very quickly we start to see full colour pictures inside the manual. Ooh, very fancy. If there was one indication that gaming had become quite popular, that was the books that had started to show up on the various shelves at bookshops. Yep, you can now buy a Sonic the Hedgehog Choose Your Own Adventure book, or even this Lemmings Choose Your Own Adventure book, which were pretty well written. Well, the Sonic ones were. Lemmings, it had some issues. But then there was Zool. Zool actually got two kids books that were, well, they weren't amazing literature, that's for sure, but did have some nice pictures, and the stories themselves, they were passable. And from here we dive headlong into the 32-bit era, with the Saturn and the PlayStation. Now, these Saturn boxes are a bit of a pain, but as we can see, Sega, well, they've still continued that exact same manual format that we saw all the way back with the Master System. And there's not even any improvements that we saw with the Mega Drive, it's pretty much exactly the same. Sony, at least over in PAL land, went with these chunky boxes, and that's because they needed to fit these much bigger manuals because, hey, what a surprise, they have multiple languages in them. And with some releases the booklets even pull double duty as the cover. But I think it's time to check in on our good friend the PC, which had gone through some changes, though we were still getting these nice chunky big boxes. So let's open and swivel up and, well, we've got the game on a CD, and we've got, well, a pretty tiny manual, all things considered. That probably could have fitted inside the jewel case if they wanted to, which is actually something that Normality did. If you ignore the advertising bump, all you really get is the CD. And inside here, in the jewel case, we get the manual, which doubles as the cover. This was because some games were actually just sold as the jewel case itself, no big box at all, so they needed to make sure they could fit everything in that small case. And with the manuals with the game becoming smaller and smaller, we started to see far more of these strategy guides. It might have been because games were also getting far more complex, but I like to think that it's because people still wanted something physical to read. And in these you managed to get maps, information on every single item in the game. They were great, but they also died off due to the internet. As the in-game tutorials got better and better and became the primary way that most people learnt how to play their games, the need for a printed manual became less and less, and we started to see them shrink over this generation. And with some of the re-releases, we actually even get a chance to compare its manual against the original, such as James Pond 2. This is the pretty terrible PS2 version, and now we have the Amiga version, which is so much nicer. Yeah, it was only 2 colours, and they dedicated an entire page to the copy protection, but it looks and reads so much better. Thankfully, not everything had been changed for the worst. Here we can see June and June 2000. The original manual was great. It had lots of information about how to play the game, all the various units, everything. It was absolutely amazing. And at the back, it had this picture of the development team. That's absolutely awesome. That's the type of extras I like. Where in June 2000, let's check out this booklet. Well, it looks a lot thinner, but it turns out they both have pretty much the same number of pages. It's just the paper stock has changed over the years. So that's not bad. So let's take a quick look through to see if it has all the same level of information. And at first glance, it's looking pretty good. It has a little bit more information on the various characters you'll see in the cutscenes, but it does have information on all the units as well as the new specials that they've added. So overall, this is a pretty good manual. It's just a pity they didn't have a picture at the end like they did in the original with the entire dev team. And this leads us on to the modern era where, to be honest, things aren't all that great. Check out this latest release, and, well, that's not a manual. That's just a bit of advertising, that's it. That was the only thing you got in the box apart from the cartridge. Things improved slightly with special editions, though it's not as good as you would have hoped. So let's check out this flashback one. It does at least have a manual, but when we start looking through it, we start noticing some oddities. The pictures, they're horribly blurry. Really, really blurry. It looks like they actually just took the original manual and just photocopied it, and then grabbed a few pictures online for the maps. It's better than not having any manual at all, but they could have put some effort into it, you know? Actually giving us multiple versions from each platform or something, but not all special editions even got a manual. This is the recent special edition of Link's Awakening, and inside the box itself is, well, just this bit of warning paper that is absolutely no use to me because it's in French. In the steel tin there is nothing at all, but thankfully there is something underneath here, which is the art book. Yep, they've decided that the art that you used to get in the back of manuals should be in its own book. Now I can't complain too much because the artwork is absolutely lovely, and it even goes into detail on each of the dungeons, all the various characters, the model work, the enemies, everything. It's absolutely awesome. Though, at one point, as I mentioned, this used to be in the back of the manual. Metroid 2 The Return of Samus had some great artwork in the back of its booklet. This is a recreation of it, because I can't find my original. And these are absolutely amazing. When the game was in black and white and you got to see what it all looked like in colour, it was absolutely superb. It allowed your imagination to fill in the details. And I used to look at this all the time and try and recreate its artwork, because I loved the game that much. Almost in response to the lack of the modern manual, we've started to see far more books in the local bookshop, including these art books. This is the one for Fable Legends that I got when I worked on the game. These tend to be quite popular with fans who want to check out how their favourite game came about, as it gives you a chance to peek behind the scenes and see how some of your favourite characters came about, by showing you concept art, variations of the models, and some of the ideas that were tried and then eventually dropped. But another type of book that's become more and more popular are these, the coffee table books. The topics can vary quite wildly, with this one showing you title screens from various games across the years. So it's full of absolutely amazing pictures and some information to go along with each of them. And then you get the books that concentrate on a single platform, like this one from Bitmap Books, which look at just the Amiga. And being a huge Amiga fan, I had to check it out, and it's absolutely amazing. You can tell there's still an appetite for the printed medium when it comes to games, as there's been a number of funded and well received books via Kickstarter, including this one, Gaming in the Obscure, which was made by friend of the channel Johnny Blanchard, aka Re-Enthused. And it's a great book if you want to check out some obscure and lesser known machines, because this guy really knows his stuff. And there we have it, several decades of gaming literature. Now if there's a platform that you think was particularly good for its manuals, please let me know in the comments below. Or if there's a manual that you really loved and you think I should check out, please do the same thing. And until next time, I've been the Goldfish. These are some bookcases that are absolutely full of booklets, and this was Goldfish on Games. Goodbye! Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you're a fan of gaming literature just as I am, please consider liking, subscribing or even sharing with your mates, as that helps these small channels like mine grow.